Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavyam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadi Tamastu Mavid Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om peace, peace, peace. And good evening. We're reading from the complete works of Swami Ramakrishnananda, and we are reading the lecture called The Locus of the Soul. And we're quite a way through this one already. So if you're just joining us, it's on page 438 at the bottom of volume 1, if you have his complete works. And we will simply continue. Man, again, has an infinite love for his own being. He wants to be or live. He does not want to not be or die. Death is regarded by him as the greatest misery, which he, therefore, wants to get rid of at any cost. That is why he wants to get rid of lions, tigers, and venomous snakes, and all ferocious and destructive animals, and even men, by killing them. He loves that which makes him happy and wants to preserve it. Whatever has the power to make him more and more happy, he loves more and more. Hence, that which is the abode of all bliss, he cannot but love most. And what is that thing which he loves most? Assuredly, he loves himself more than all other things, and that is why Yajnavalkya instructs Maitreyi, his wife, in this way, quote, "Not for the sake of the husband, but for the satisfaction of one's own self, that the husband is loved. Not for the satisfaction of the wife, but for the satisfaction of one's own self, the wife is loved. Not for the satisfaction of the sons, but for the satisfaction of one's own self, the sons are loved. Not for the satisfaction of wealth, but for the satisfaction of one's own self, wealth is loved. Not for the satisfaction of the Brahmana, but for the satisfaction of one's own self, the Brahmana is loved. Not for the satisfaction of the Kshatriya, but for the satisfaction of one's own self, the Kshatriya is loved. Not for the satisfaction of the blissful habitations of souls, but for the satisfaction of one's own self, the blissful habitation of souls are loved. Not for the satisfaction of the gods, but for the satisfaction of one's own self, the gods are loved. Not for the satisfaction of all living beings, but for the satisfaction of one's own self, all the living beings are loved. Not for the satisfaction of the whole universe, but for the satisfaction of one's own self, the whole universe is loved. Therefore, my beloved Maitreyi, one's own self should be rightly known after it is heard of, well understood, and profoundly and repeatedly meditated upon. For by hearing about, understanding, deeply meditating upon, and that realizing one's own self, all this that is non-self is known." Unquote. Thus, since man loves himself most of all, his self must be the abode of blissfulness, or bliss itself, which in Sanskrit is called Ananda. And of course, that's exactly right. The self is none other than identical with Brahman. Atman is Brahman. And so if one can find their true self, then they can truly find all that is blissful. And of course, somebody who is on the brink of suicide has obviously not made any attempt, or is simply completely thwarted in their effort to find the true self within. Otherwise, they would never consider such a thing. So this is the essence of that teaching, and it's an important teaching. It's an oft-quoted phrase from the Upanishads, and the idea is that whenever you are attracted to anything in the world, remember that that attraction comes from the fact that Brahman is in everything that you're seeing. And it is Brahman, which is identical with your true self, that is really what it is that's attracting you. And so this is one of the secrets to trying to deify the universe, deify the whole world that you're experiencing. So that's an important quote from the Upanishads. Then he goes on, so the consciousness in man is Satchidananda, or eternally all-knowing and all-blissful, and this is what is called Paramatman, or the soul of all souls, the supreme soul. Paramatman means supreme soul. But who am I? Am I distinct and separate from my consciousness? Is not consciousness my very being? Because unconsciousness overpowers my consciousness during the time of sleep, I do not exist at the time. Hence, I and my consciousness are one, identical, and if consciousness is eternally all-knowing and all-blissful, why do I not feel myself to be so? In answer to this, we say that the ego, indeed, is not separate from consciousness, but it is only a portion and not the whole of it. We have already seen consciousness is limitless, but the ego is limited, and as such, its knowledge about itself must be limited. Thus, we cannot say that the ego does not know its true nature. In that case, it could not love itself above all other things. But the fact is, as we have already seen, it loves itself most of all, and thereby proves its all blissful nature. Again, we cannot say that it knows its true nature fully. In that case, it could not have the least desire for any sensual enjoyment. For how can that which is infinitely blissful ever feel any want of enjoyment? So the ego knows and does not know its true nature simultaneously. Just as the father of one of the boys who are chanting a portion of the Vedas in chorus knows that his son's voice is there in the sound, but does not know to distinguish it from the voices of the other children, which have drowned the voice of his son. Innumerable worldly concerns have been dragging this poor little ego towards themselves so much that it has no power to come back to the home inside itself, but remains tied to the world, outside which with innumerable ropes of attachment. And of course, the ego is what John Dobson used to call a genetic invention. Our genetic programming have invented the concept of, or the sense of ego, the egotism, in order to keep the organism alive. The gene's job is to keep you alive and to pass on the genetic programming. And so in order to pass on the genetic programming, you have to distinguish between this body-mind complex and the rest of the world. And then you have to make decisions about the rest of the world. Is this good to eat? Is this not good to eat? Is this a friendly animal? Is this not a friendly animal? Is this a good source of water? Is it a bad source of water? Is this person part of my tribe, or is it the neighboring tribe that's trying to conquer us? So you have to make all these distinctions. And so the ego is very busy at protecting this organism so that it survives and can pass on its genetic programming. So it's been hugely successful, as you can tell, by the overpopulation of the globe. And a lot of organisms, if it weren't for man, would be overpopulating the globe. A lot of them are still overpopulating the globe. So different kinds of organisms tend to be very successful. Invasive species tend to overcome the environment when they're out of their ordinary environment where they had predators and competition. So the gene pools of these different organisms can be very successful in allowing those genes to survive. And if you've ever seen the number of seeds that a tree or a plant produces, you can see how difficult it can be sometimes for an organism to survive. Thousands and thousands upon seeds are produced by one tree in the hopes that one of them is going to land in just the right spot so that it can grow into another tree. So your ego is, in a sense, a very necessary thing, and yet it is also the main obstacle to our spiritual growth and to our spiritual realization, because, as we just mentioned, everything comes from Brahman. Everything in this universe is one with Brahman, but our ego has cordoned off this little body-mind complex into its own little shell that needs to be protected. And so it now thinks of everything else as other. So you've got yourself and you've got all this other stuff out there, some of which is fine and some of which is not fine. And this is the way our organisms survive. But in order to undo some of that programming, you have to approach spiritual life with a great deal of zeal. And you have to take up one or more of the 4 yogas in order to relink yourself. You know, religion, that's what religion means, is to relink yourself back to your source. And yoga has the same meaning. You're going to reconnect yourself like yoking the oxen to a cart. You have to relink yourself back to your true source so that you realize that all things in the universe are truly one with Brahman and one with your true self. All right, so going on. It has no time to think of itself, even how then can it ever know its true nature? As it is perfect misrepresentation of consciousness from which it has its being. Sri Ramakrishna used to illustrate the deplorable condition of the ego in this way. The little child has got its whole mind to itself, and that it's why it is so happy all day long, spent its time in play, and feeling tired and then falls asleep. But when it grows up to be a boy or a girl, it is sent to school. Then a quarter of his mind, the boy is forced to give to his lessons for fear of being punished for his unmindfulness. Then he grows up to be a man and gets married, and half of his mind goes to his wife. And when after that sometime he becomes a father, the remainder of his mind goes to his child, and he has no mind remaining to be given to God. Thus, man cannot help becoming a devotee of the world instead of becoming a devotee of God. Becomes completely mindless at that point, doesn't he? All right. It is apparently absurd, but really true when I say that God is nearer to you than you are to yourself. Where are you at present? Where your mind is. There you must be. And where is your mind? Scattered all over the world, and tied to it so firmly that you deem it almost impossible to bring it back inside yourself. And where is God? He is always there, sitting in your heart. As we learned from all ancient sages, so God is always inside, and you are always outside yourself. Or in other words, God is nearer to you than you are to yourself. And of course, in this day and age where we have access to an infinite number of books and an infinite number of videos and documentaries and movies and so forth and so on, we can put our mind literally very easily to any part of the world. and into any scenario. On the good side, you can also do that in a spiritual way. You can watch some of our premier lecturers of the order and of many spiritual traditions giving talks or doing services. You can listen to sacred music from some of the best musicians in the world. And so all of these things can help to put your mind in the best place. So distraction, it can be distraction or it can be of benefit. And so you can literally put your mind anywhere you choose. Now, if you've ever had the opportunity to be in a play, if you were lucky enough to be in a play that had to do with some religious character, you can know that that's also a very powerful way to put your mind in a good place. You might be cast as one of the devotees of Buddha, or one of the devotees of Ramakrishna, or an associate of Vivekananda, or one of Jesus's disciples, or one of the shepherds or something. We used to have some little folk operas here, and it was a wonderful opportunity to put your whole being into that position. So being in a spiritual play can be a very useful practice. And it also can help train your mind to do that type of meditation, a kind of discursive meditation where you put yourself in the presence of your chosen ideal or some other great spiritual personality, and you remember some story about them. If you're really good at the Puranic stories, you can think of one of the Puranic stories, or if you've read the Gospel many times, you can put yourself into one of the stories in the Gospel and so forth. And by so doing, that's a type of meditation where you literally put yourself in that kind of situation. So, through this ego is an offspring of consciousness. Still, by its association with the dull, dead material world, it has imbibed the qualities of matter more than those of its progenitor. That is why it deems itself to be limited and absolutely imperfect in every way. It is a hungry, thirsty, and passionate being, and as such is bound to be restless and active on account of its passions and appetites. I can't help remembering one of the lines from Gilbert and Sullivan's Mikado, where this character is going to have to relinquish marrying his beloved, even though he loves her with great tenderness. He loves himself with tenderest love even more. And so the problem is, if he marries her, then this other person's going to go off, and then the Mikado's going to come and find out that he hasn't executed anybody. And he, being the Lord High Executioner, he's supposed to execute people. And so they're going to abolish the post if no one is executed, or he is going to be the next person executed. So since he loves himself with love tender still, he relinquishes his love for his beloved betrothed wife. So Gilbert had a great insight into human nature. All right, many people are apt to confound this ego with pure consciousness of the infinite self known as Brahman. And in order to save them from committing this egregious and fatal blunder, Sri Shankaracharya very carefully explains the four most famous texts from the four Vedas. I am Brahman, thou art that, this self is Brahman, and consciousness is Brahman. According to Sri Shankara, we should not understand the texts literally, as in the case absurd meanings will come out of them. How can I, thou, and this self and consciousness, all meaning ego and thus limited, ever be equal to or the same as Brahman, who is infinite? And yet the Vedas declare this ego to be the same as the infinite self or Brahman. Then how to explain them? Well, they didn't say that the ego was, they said that it's your higher self, your true self, and your absolute consciousness. The word ego is not in there at all, so I don't know why one would confuse that. But sometimes people get megalomania, they think, okay, I am Brahman, so that means everything I think, do, and say must be true. Well, no, that's the little ego talking, not the true self. Then how to explain them? In this sentence, quote, this Devadatta is that man. We identify Devadatta with that man, meaning a man that we have seen before, although the latter looked very differently from Devadatta on account of his beard and peculiar dress, which the gentleman before us has not got. Yet, looking at the sameness of age, color, height, gait, cut of the face, etc., we cannot help identifying both of them, rejecting the differences that subsist between them. Similarly, rejecting the differences of limitation and limitlessness that exist between the ego and Brahman, and looking at the same conscious nature of both, we are naturally led to identify both of them. Ego, free from all limitations, is the same as Brahman, and so this limitless ego has thus been described. The ego is not a man, not a god, not a yaksha, neither a brahmana nor a kshatriya, neither a vaishya or a sudra, neither a brahmachari nor a householder, neither an ascetic nor a sannyasin, but it is pure consciousness. Led away by the false delusion of sensuality, as long as we shall allow this ego to be identified with our nearest and dearest relatives and friends, with the body and the mind and innumerable desires contained therein, so long it is limited and blind, and it has nothing to do with the infinite self. Step by step, it will have to rise up from its extreme, limited, and narrow state to less limited and broader conditions, till at last it becomes unconditioned, unconfined, or limitless. As a tributary loses itself in and becomes one with the river, and as the river loses itself in and becomes one with the ocean, so the ego should be made to lose itself in and become one with the individual soul, which takes bodies after bodies to satisfy its innumerable desires. And this eternal individual soul should, in turn, be made to lose itself in and become one with the infinite and universal soul, or pure consciousness, eternally all-knowing and all-blissful. And of course, many of you remember the statement that Vivekananda made his ego so large as to embrace the whole universe, whereas Nag Mahashaya made his ego so small that it could escape the net of Maya that way. So 2 ways of escaping the net of Maya. Either get too big for it or become so small you can get through it. And you could equate the ego with the net of Maya. That's Maya's the source of this ego, you could say, because it's when your body-mind complex is faced with the task of surviving in the apparent universe of Maya that all of these different problems come about. Now, we have some idea of the soul that dwells in the body. It is clear that the infinite and universal soul can be localized nowhere. In him, all the individual souls and all egos, all minds, and all living organisms, nay, the whole universe exists, and he exists in himself, as he is one without a second. Just to remind us, the title of this whole section is the locus of the soul. So we've just decided that it's too big to be confined in any particular place. He is absolute and unrelated, beyond space, time, and causation. So you can't locate something that's beyond space, time, and causation. If it's not in space, it's not locatable. He is absolute and unrelated, beyond space, time, and causation, self-existent and self-conscious, pure and perfect, life itself and blessedness itself. But what is the locus of the soul that takes body after body in trying to unfold itself? In the fourth Brahmana of the third chapter of the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it is stated that in the beginning, before the creation, self alone existed, in the form of a man. Then, looking around, he found nothing but himself, and finding himself alone, he got frightened. Then he reflected within himself, since there is nothing besides me, from whom am I to fear? And then his fear left him. And as fear only comes from another and not from one's own self, this is the absolute, the unrelated, and the unconditioned self who lives in himself. That is, if you're not a masochist, then of course you can fear yourself too. But beyond that, other than that, you generally don't fear yourself. Then it is stated in the same Brahmana, he did not like to be alone. He wanted a partner, and that a portion of his man form transformed itself into a male-female form, half male and half female. He separated that newly transformed portion of his body from himself and remained unmanifested. Then husband and wife came into existence out of that separated portion. The husband's body was not whole but half. The wife's body was not whole but half. Both together became full. The husband was not the void, and the wife made the void full. Yajnavalkya has taught this. Well, this is a very similar kind of myth that you find all over the place. And of course, these myths don't make literal sense. First of all, if you're talking about the ultimate reality isn't going to have any thoughts about being alone or needing a partner or having fears or any such thing, and it's certainly not going to identify itself as one gender or another. And so all of these things are simply put in terms that are more understandable to us mortals, and so it talks about it being a man and looking around and so forth. But all of that is purely mythological fiction in order to try to illustrate some sort of point. And the point is that it starts out as an undifferentiated wholeness, and when it splits into this manifest universe due to the power of Maya, it splits into two first. The split has to be some sort of duality, and then that duality will split again. And of course, if you think of that duality as the subject-object split, then the subject remains one and the object becomes many. So that's usually the way it's put. And this kind of myth exists all over the world. You might have recognized some similarities with Adam and Eve in the biblical account of creation. It's not all that different. But it goes all over the world. You can find myths similar to this in any continent you look at, where the beginning was some sort of unfathomable darkness, the unfathomable void, or they'll liken it to an unfathomably large ocean or something of that nature. And then something comes to make some sort of separation in it. So a very common way of explaining the creation. We learn from this how the unrelated appears as related, the unconditioned appears as conditioned, the one appears as two, the whole appears to split itself up into halves, the self-existent unit appears to become two units, mutually dependent upon each other. The sexless appears as male and female. This is the beginning of creation. The male is the creator and the female is the creation. The male is the unmanifested background and the female is the manifestation of past, present, and future, is length, breadth, and thickness, form, touch, taste, smell, and sight, speech, action, locomotion, evacuation, and enjoyment, thinking, feeling, and willing, creation, preservation, and destruction, beginning, middle, and end. In fact, we cannot imagine creation without a creator, preservation without a preserver, and destruction without a destroyer. Where does creation exist? She exists in the heart of the Creator, as we know that Lakshmi stays in the heart of Narayana. Where does the Creator exist? He exists in the infinite self, or consciousness that goes by the name of Brahman. Where does Brahman exist? He exists in himself. He is eternal, all blissful, and all-knowing. All bliss and all knowledge comes from him alone. He has got the monopoly of them. None else can give bliss and wisdom, and if anyone else has the power to give a little of them, he is only the apparent giver, the real giver being Brahman, who uses him as his tool. Whatever is glorious, charming, and sublime, he says in his incarnation as Sri Krishna, know that a portion of my power has brought it into existence. When God manifests himself through a person, then alone he can make others happy and wise. And anyone should remember this. Anyone who has any kind of skill or special talent or power, whether it be a healing power or a power to entertain or a power to amuse or a power to create beauty, to remember that that power simply comes from Brahman, and you're just an instrument that's channeling that particular power. If he with a big H has got the monopoly of bliss and wisdom and life, and if I and all men and women have an intense longing for them, and if nothing else can satisfy us, then we will have to go to him with a capital H. How to go to him? Where can we find him out? Let us see. Horses are to be found in stables and not in nests. That is, horses are to be searched where horses live and not where the birds live. Milk is to be found in milk and not in water. Salt is to be found in salt alone and not in sugar. So if Brahman is consciousness, then he can be found only in consciousness and not in unconsciousness. Spirit can be found only in spirit and not in matter. Of course, if you truly have the eye of complete wisdom, you see that matter is infused with spirit as well. But our normal consciousness tends to make that distinction, that matter is unconscious and spirit is conscious. But if you can go beyond that stage where you see that difference, you can truly realize that consciousness pervades all things. The world around me is material. Whatever formful is matter, and the world is made up of forms. Whatever is formful is matter, and the world is made up of forms. So it is material. Hence, spirit or consciousness cannot be found there. But there are two kinds of forms which make up the world, animate and inanimate, the conscious and the unconscious. So consciousness can be found amongst the conscious or animated forms which go by the names of animals. And again, amongst animals, some are less conscious and some more conscious. So infinite consciousness should be searched among those animals who are the most conscious. And of course, as I say, our normal problem is that we see all these material things in the world which we sometimes have desires for. And so to try to seek consciousness in matter directly can lead to a lot of problems. And so that's why it's generally, we see this distinction right from the beginning, is that when you're doing spiritual practices, normally it's not going to be very easy to try to see consciousness pervading everything. And so the consciousness is thought to be only in what we normally perceive as conscious. So amongst men, some are more conscious and some even more so. Some less so, some more so. So infinite consciousness should be searched amongst men who are most conscious. Such men are the great teachers, the great gurus, whom we call the incarnations, gods, rishis, sages, and seers, like Rama, Krishna, Shiva, Sukha, Sanaka, Narada, Vyasa, Vashishta, Parasara, Valmiki, Buddha, Moses, Christ, Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhvacharya, Muhammad, Zoroaster, Jina, Confucius, and many others. We sit at the feet of one of these great teachers in order to realize infinite consciousness. Every man is born with such a teacher. A man calls himself either a Hindu, a Buddhist, a Jain, a Christian, a Mohammedan, a Zoroastrian, a Confucian, a Judist. That's not usually the way we put it, but anyway, a Jew, and so on. It is always desirable to be guided by one such great teacher. We inherit religious propensities with many other propensities from our parents and ancestors, and since almost each and every one of us is born with a certain great teacher whom his father and grandfather have inherited from their ancestors, therefore it is but natural to love him, revere, worship, and follow that particular teacher. Now, of course, the great psychologist Carl Jung pointed out that there is a collective unconscious which we inherit, and that's what explains why some of us don't seem to vibrate, you could say, or resonate with some of the heritage of our parents. They might be devout devotees of a particular religious tradition, and we find that religious tradition just doesn't seem to resonate with us. And we find a great interest in some other tradition. And this might be revealed in dreams or in just the things that you feel attracted to, maybe the countries you feel attracted to, the areas of the world, or certain kinds of people that you're attracted to. And so we now have the idea that we don't have to be confined to the religion of our ancestors. Just because you're born in a particular tradition doesn't mean you have to stay there. You might find greater inspiration in some other tradition. All right, so now let us examine in brief the teachings of some of those great teachers. First of all, let us see what the great Indian sages of yore have to teach us. Out of their pure and spotless minds, the Upanishads, which are regarded as constituting the heads of all the Vedas, have emanated. So by quoting a few out of the many similar passages from some of the Upanishads, we shall know the mind of these great sages. Now, of course, Atmavidyananda was teaching in South India, which is one of the most orthodox sections of India, you could say. And so you can tell that he's preaching to the choir, you can see. He's not like Vivekananda preaching in Europe and America. He's preaching in his home country to one of the most orthodox parts of his home country. He who realizes Brahman, these are quotes from the various Upanishads. He who realizes Brahman realizes the highest. Therefore it has been said, Brahman is eternal, infinite, and all knowledge. He who knows him hidden in the sanctum sanctorum situated in the recesses of his heart, he enjoys all that is desirable, along with the all-knowing Brahman. That's from the Taittiriya Upanishad. And the next is from the Mundaka Upanishad. That effulgent and inconceivable being is very vast and at the same time subtler than the subtlest. He is the most distant of all distant things, and at the same time very near. To those who know him, he is hidden in the recesses of the heart. Of course, many of these passages sound like what we might think of as Zen koans that produce or present to you contradictory things to get the idea across that really Brahman and your Atman are beyond description, beyond any of these subtle distinctions that we might try to put on them. And from the Katha Upanishad, the inner self, mannequin as big as the thumb, resides in the hearts of all men. Him you should carefully separate from your body, just as the middle blade of a grass should be very carefully separated from it. Know him to be spotless and eternal. All right, I'm going to pause here for today. Next week we have our crystal bowl sound meditation, so you can join us for that. And I wanted to remind everybody that we have Karma Yoga Day tomorrow, so I hope that many of you can join us. And I'm going to put in a little pitch for a project that I've been working on for the last almost 15 years now. We raise try to raise as many of the flowers as we can for the puja in our temple gardens. And the most difficult time of year is the winter, and especially difficult is the late fall and winter, when the roses have kind of stopped and the hibiscus have slowed way down and the dahlias have gone to sleep and the lilies are gone. And so we rely on camellias. Now, the problem with camellias is that they don't pick up until probably, mid-January, and they're in full force through the rest of January and February and into March. And so we rely on them quite heavily. But some camellias do bloom in the fall, but most of the ones that bloom in the fall are rather fragile. If you try to pick them, if you don't pick them at just the right time, they'll fall apart. And if they need any washing, then you're really sunk. They'll just fall apart. So one thing I've been working on is hybridizing camellias to have more early blooming camellias. And there are a couple of species that are rather rare that bloom at odd times of year, so we're using those. And trying to breed some of the early bloomers with some of the later bloomers that have better substance. So that's one part of the project. The other part of the project is that the camellias are limited primarily to white, pink, and red. But there are some rare species that are yellow, and a few varieties that are showing more of the purplish, reddish color. And so we're trying to breed more of those so that we have a wider spectrum of colors. The yellow species are quite rare and hard to come by, but I was fortunate to get several of them. And they're very difficult to breed with the other camellias. Although they all have this sets of 15 chromosomes, some of them have only 2 sets, some of them have 4 sets, and some of them have 6 sets. And they're not completely homologous. That means the 15 chromosomes in this plant don't completely match up with the chromosomes in this plant. Some of them are a little bit longer and some of them are a little bit shorter, or they might have a bend in a slightly different place. So if you try to breed them, sometimes you don't get seeds. In fact, a lot of times you don't get seeds. Or if you get seeds, they're not well developed. They're just full of kind of a jello rather than a hard endosperm. So it's a very difficult process. But we have gotten a few yellow hybrids. And then there's some fragrant camellias. Again, 99% of the camellias that you find in the store are not fragrant. But there are some species that are very small. The flowers are smaller than a dime. And then there are others that are maybe a little bit bigger than a quarter. Those do have a lovely fragrance, but again, they're not that easy to hybridize with these other species. So we've been working on getting more fragrant camellias, as well as earlier bloomers and a broader spectrum of colors. So we have a lot of those now. We have a lot of seedlings. You have to make a lot of crosses. I probably make 3,000 crosses a year and get perhaps 100 pods, and out of that I might get 300 seedlings, out of which maybe half survive, and out of those maybe only one or two are very interesting. So it takes a lot of work, and we have a lot of plants that need to be potted up and repotted up and repotted up and so forth. So if any of you are interested in helping with garden projects of a kind of a scientific nature, hope you can join us. Also, the whole big garden is a huge area that produces a lot of the flowers, and that needs a lot of care. And if you're not able to come on the designated Saturday morning, just contact either Mahayogananda Vijayaprana or myself and schedule a different time when you might like to come. And this would apply to any kind of service that you might like to give. Perhaps you have a special talent of some sort of video editing or some other expertise, maybe a special kind of painting or restorations or special skills or special aptitude for cleaning and so forth, or organizing or databasing and so forth. Just let us know, and we will try to find a good project for you that you can do on your own time or on times other than the designated Karma Yoga time. And so that's my pitch for our Karma Yoga Day tomorrow. We used to have quite a good crew before the pandemic, and it has just never picked up since then. So we would like to have more people participating. All right, let me close with a chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it yet is it ever the same. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Nice to see you all.